Tough day for the folks in Oklahoma. Very tough time for a long time. Mr. George, I want to clarify several things. One of them, you made the comment that so far none of them have been turned down. They just had this inordinately large amount of paperwork and additional questions applied to them, and it's a long delay with no response, and it's basically we'll get back to you at some point. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
Man, that sounds like the Keystone Pipeline to me. But that's a whole different issue. You had mentioned under your audit, people under investigation are not under oath, or not under investigation or audit, are not under oath, and that the IRS staff has not been forthcoming on some of the things. Is that the statement that you used?
That's the inference.
Is that both staff and management that you've had conversations with, or have staff and management been in that conversation and you feel like they've not been completely forthcoming in all the questions you've asked?
I'm sorry, your question is because management has...
No, staff and management, both. When you say IRS personnel have not been completely forthcoming on some of the issues you've asked about.
That is an inference that can be made from the fact that we have not gotten clear answers.
So that's what I'm trying to ask is staff, management, so two different levels of individuals, you're not getting completely full answers that you expect when you ask them.
While I am not in those interviews personally, sir, that is my understanding.
Okay. Mr. Wolin, did you ever ask anyone at the IRS, because you had to hear about all these reports as well, that possibly political activity was happening within the IRS? It's been mentioned before already, 42 different major news stories were out there that there was potential targeting. Did you have a conversation with anyone, anywhere in the IRS where you asked the question, is this true or is this happening, sometime after May the 3rd, 2012?
I did not, Congressman. Again, with respect to the details of how the IRS administers the tax code, especially...
No, I understand. I'm just asking, did you have that conversation where you asked someone, is this true, is this happening? Because there were a lot of media reports before this came out.
First, I was aware of this, Congressman. It was when the Inspector General came to me at some point in 2012 and said, on the basis of some congressional inquiries, he was going to begin an audit, and that was the first I learned of it.
Okay, so you didn't see any of the media reports over the group that you oversee?
I did not, that I recall.
Wow. Mr. Shulman, in my office, before a letter goes out, there are 4 different people, including myself, that go through that letter as it goes through the process of edits and review and fact checks and all those things. I assume it's very similar in your office as well, that you're not actually penning every letter. There are multiple people that are involved in the process on it. I am one of many that wrote a letter in 2012 to your office and received a response back from Steve Miller. In that response that I got back from Steve Miller about this exact issue, he said in those cases where the application raises issues for which there's no established published precedent, I assume that's the Tea Party groups and everything else, or no uniformity, EO determinations may refer the application to EO technical. EO technical, the applications are reviewed by tax law specialists whose job it is to interpret and provide guidance on the law and to work closely with IRS chief counsel attorneys on the issues. That's a lot of folks when there's new ground to be broken. Now, from my district, this is one of those letters that came in from someone in my district that specifically contacted me and had a whole series of questions that came back to them with what is in my area the Oklahoma City Patriots in Action Group. They were asked questions such as, have any candidates running for public office spoken, or will they speak at your function or organization? If so, include a transcript of any speeches given by candidates, which is remarkable to be able to ask. Do you directly or indirectly communicate with members of legislative bodies? And there's no definition for what indirect communication is given on that. It's just, have you had, I don't even know what that would mean. My favorite question, who developed the website and has control over the data generated by the website? Not only is that an insane question to ask, it's not even grammatically correct. 19A, provide all copies of your corporate minutes from inception to the present. This was asked, and at the beginning of the first page it says, under penalty of perjury, I declare that I've examined this information, and goes through in this long statement. My issue is this is new ground. And based on the letter that we received when I wrote the letter to you, it lists a long list of people that have to be involved in the formation of this. How do we get the list of individuals that were involved, or at least the process of how these questions were done? Because this assumption that this is a couple rogue agents does not match up with the letter and how we were told this was actually created. This includes technical folks, attorneys, chief counsel, EO. This is a pretty large list of people that are involved in creating this. Someone knew, in fact, a lot of someone's knew about this, because you can't form this without this. How do we get that information? Mrs. Lerner is obviously the best person to ask. She's chosen not to answer questions. How do we get that?
Look, as you said, there's probably other people who work on the details of that who you could ask. I would presume you ask it directly. I'd presume that the IG, who now has a better understanding of this, would be able to be helpful. And I would presume that the committee investigative staff will take letters like that in your questions and ask, who was involved.
If I can have the luxury here, Mr. George, is there any way to know about how many people? Has that been a part of your audit to try to determine how many people went into creating this and how many different offices? Because this lists at least 3 different offices and multiple groups of people that were referenced just in their response to me in creating one of these surveys.
My understanding is we have not made that determination, sir.
Well, that might be something we need to know.
We will take that under advisement, Congress.
I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. George.
Well, gentlemen,
And I thank my colleague.
gentlemen, you have the last 15 seconds.
You can have the last 10 seconds. Go.
Mr. Wolin, yesterday Mr. Lieu said senior aides at the White House, the Treasury Department, the IRS debated the best way to break this news. When Ms. Lerner gave the speech and you had the planted question how you were going to spin this, how you were going to bring this forward, were you involved in those discussions on how this story was going to break to the American people?
No, I was not involved in
So you weren't one of the people at Treasury involved, even though it's your responsibility to oversee the IRS?
Congressman, there were, and I think there's been press reporting on this, conversations among folks in the Chief of Staff's office and among lawyers about these questions, and I was not directly involved in those conversations, no.
Who at Treasury was?
Well, I think, again, we'll work with you to get the names, Congressman, but it were people in the Chief of Staff's office.
Do you know how the name Celia Rhodey, she was the person who planted the question, you know how she was chosen and why she was chosen?
Congressman, I had no involvement, no knowledge of that until we learned about it probably together when there was testimony from Mr. Miller on that question. I have no knowledge of that.
Thank you. Mr. George, following up on Mr. Pocan, just one quick thing. I had our staff check, and Citizens United was decided and announced on 21 January 2010, and the IRS began targeting Tea Party groups in March of 2010. Isn't that correct?
I'm not sure of the date of the...
But the first file pulled, according to Ms. Paz, would have been that less than 2 months later.
No. I'm not sure of the date of the issuance of the Supreme Court.
Oh, no, we can all get that at Google.
Right.
That's a fact online. But essentially, if there's a coincidence, the IRS began targeting in less than 60 days Tea Party groups after Citizens United was started. I would assume that it's awful hard to have this supposed exponential increase in applications in less than 60 days, especially since they had gathered starting with application 1. Isn't that essentially, without exceeding what Mr. Connolly would agree to, if there's a coincidence, isn't that the coincidence that it happened so close to the deciding of a Supreme Court case, not to the increase in applications?
It does seem coincidental, sir.
Thank you. With that, we go to the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Gosar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Shulman, are you familiar with any examples in which confidential information relating to the application for tax-exempt status of groups was leaked to any entity outside of the IRS?
I'm familiar with some press reports and have vague recollection of things happening.
Okay, so we're going to pick up one in just particular. Media reports asserts that Austin Goolsbee, then the President's chairman of the Council of Economic Advisor, disclosed confidential tax information about Koch Industries to reporters on August 27, 2010. Do you have any idea how Mr. Goolsbee obtained that information?
Two things. One is, if I remember from the time, it wasn't confirmed that he had confidential information, and to the extent he did, if that's your premise, I have no idea.
The whole thing is that should have alerted you, because that's something very, very important. It kind of hit the screen and it's a pretty big deal. So did you ask your staff at the IRS how this happened, and did you find out if anyone at the IRS provided Mr. Goolsbee with that information? Because it caused you, I just saw you with your caution. It caused you to think about it, and somebody in your nature should have gone back and asked. Did you ask anybody, yes or no, in the IRS to look into that, how you got that information?
It was several years ago, but my best memory is, and I have a recollection that the Inspector General was actually did an investigation to see if something had happened. But that's my best memory.
At that time?
It's very vague.
Is that true, Mr. George? I didn't think you were, at that time, investigating.
Congressman, this is one of the most frustrating aspects of implementing or overseeing the Internal Revenue Service, and those are some of the restrictions that the tax code places on me and my ability to communicate information to people outside of the Ways and Means Committee.
Okay.
The IRS has strict confidentiality rules, which we actually enforce, and which I'm not allowed to provide.
I appreciate that. I want to keep going here. So Mr. Shulman, how would that information be obtained? I mean, from your understanding of the IRS, you're the head here guy. How would that be obtained? It had to come from a leak, right?
It shouldn't be obtained. Section 6103 prohibits IRS employees from disclosing specific taxpayer
You gave me my answer. So, Mr. Shulman, 6 months after Mr. Goolsbee made that public information, you went to the White House and met with him according to the White House records on February 3rd, 2011. Did you ask Mr. Goolsbee then or at any other time how he obtained that information?
Not to my recollection.
Why not?
Because there's lots of things that happen in the press that involve the IRS. I don't remember that meeting, but I
But my understanding is this is a very important piece, particularly as a director, that you should have looked at. Because, by the way, sir, did you take an oath of office?
I did take an oath of office.
Okay. Let's keep going. Are you familiar with the news organization's ProPolitica's publication of pending tax-exempt applications from conservative-leaning organizations?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Are you familiar with those publications? The news?
ProPublica?
Yes.
I'm familiar with the organization
Okay.
ProPublica.
It is my understanding, based on reports from that publication, that your office provided that publication with the applications that were still pending, which were confidential. Is that your understanding?
That my office? I saw news reports of issues around ProPublica that I remember, and I don't remember the time stamp. And again, my best recollection is when those news reports broke, that it was referred to the IG to look at.
So what contributed to the confidential pending applications making it through the internal review process and being provided to the publication?
I
don't
have any knowledge of the premise that it happened. I saw news reports.
Well, but it should have alerted you because, I mean, as a head person with these big things happening, you should have followed up. Beauty's in the detail. I've watched you all day. You're really good at certain parts of detail, and then you obscure the rest. I mean, there's a disease going in America. I see it in trials all over the country. We feign because somebody gets in our face that we don't acknowledge something. I want to go further. Are you aware that in July 2012, Senator Harry Reid claimed Mitt Romney hadn't paid taxes for the last 10 years and claimed to have the information supporting that? Are you aware of that? I'm sure you are.
I have a recollection of reading that in the paper.
Do you know how Mr. Reid obtained that information? Did you look into this?
I have no idea.
Doesn't that alarm you that all of a sudden this pertinent information comes up, you're the head of this agency, and you're not asking questions? Shame on you. Absolutely shame on you. Did you ask for any other leaks of any other information, confidential information on anybody else? I mean, I've just now illustrated you 3 different incidences for private information, and yet you did nothing. So let me ask you again.
If the gentleman would conclude his questioning.
Yes. Did you faithfully take this oath? And I want to highlight it, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office in which I'm about to enter. Did you take that oath?
I took the oath of office.
Thank you.